Hello, everybody. Benton Reed here, and welcome to another speed draw. Today, we're going to be doing some fan art inspired by the newest EP from one of my favorite bands, that band being Spiritbox. They just released a new EP called Fear of Fear that's incredibly good, and I've been listening to it nonstop all the time. And I wanted to do some fan art for it, specifically inspired by the single The Void, and the specific lyric, "The way that you drive me to the edge of a hole that was made for me," because it's a Junji Ito reference, and so it's just really a double whammy of my two interests. So, without further ado, let's hop right in. So, to start off, I knew I kind of wanted this art shape at the top, so I made a big ol' ellipse circle and just used that to kind of create this shape. Started sketching out my idea very, very roughly. I thought about just using a pre-made font, and then I decided that that was lazy and I didn't want to do that for the band logo. So then I start trying to kind of set guide boxes, and I decide to set my own guide boxes and make them even. And then I realized that I miscounted the number of letters in Spiritbox, and so I did my guides incorrectly for the first run, so I'm just doing these letters for nothing. But then I'd get the correct numbers, and I wanted to do kind of a graffiti, really like pointy style for these letters in the logo. And so I just take a dot and slowly start roughing them in, giving them a lot of movement, a lot of points, a lot of interaction with each other, really making them feel like they're kind of bending around each other. Some of the letters were a lot harder than others. The P and the B were a pain in my butt, ironically, very alliterative. But I'm incredibly happy with how this logo turned out. There are parts of this piece that I kind of just had to say, you know what, it's done. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because it's just a fan art piece. But this logo, I'm really proud of how it came out. So I break away from the logo for a minute to get down to the figure that I want to draw. So like I said, I'm going from the lyric, "a hole that was made for me," and I'm kind of taking the imagery from the Junji Ito story that's in reference to, and creating a figure falling down through this series of holes. And so I start by drawing the figure. I had this kind of costume concept of a pale purple leotard with this like cropped military jacket on top of it. So kind of rough that in. There's definitely some anatomy things in this that I could have done a little differently to make it a bit more dynamic. Her shoulders are kind of cocked the wrong way, but I'm really happy with how the texturing and everything came out, especially in the hair. I've been on a good hair run recently, and so I'm taking my wins where I can get them. That's not good hair yet. I cleaned up the shape a little bit in a minute, and it makes it a lot better. But I like a lot of the details I managed to get, a lot of the shading I managed to get. I was working at a really, really low resolution, and so it was a little difficult to get a ton of detail in this. I think I was working at 128, which trying to fit this much detail into 128 is a lot. For reference, the PNG that I'm talking to you from is a 128 by 128 square, and it just contains the upper quarter of my body. So trying to fit an entire figure and a logo and designs into that was a big challenge, but I knew I wanted something square because I wanted to kind of mimic a EP cover or an album cover. I thought about doing fishnets and I immediately abandoned that idea, but after some resizing and some retouching, I moved back into the logo. I think about doing some color stuff. There's a lot of stuff I try with this logo that I abandon, but I knew I wanted to do this kind of outline, staggered effect. Thought about some chaotic dithering, but that's going to go away in a minute because I just do not like how it looks. This off-green color is also going to go away in a minute. It's going to go back to pure white, and it looks so much better. Believe me, it looks so much better. But I'm just kind of doing this staggered light, dark outline to give it just a little bit more interest. And I start with just the S by itself to kind of get a proof of concept to make sure that I have all the colors that I need and I kind of know what I'm doing. So I'm cleaning up some of the colors, doing another dark layer, and then when I move on to the P, I go back to the stark white. When I move on to the P in a moment, I'll do it layer by layer. So I'll do this light pinky purple layer, get rid of the dithering, the light pinky purple layer around all the letters, which takes a little while. Just going nice and around, varying up my connections in a couple of places to kind of create some interest, but nothing too fancy. This is kind of just menial part of pixel art where it's just, you're just placing down individual little dots almost like stippling, but somehow even worse. And moving on to the second darker layer, really varying my line weights on the darker layers, just to give it a little bit more movement and a little bit more interest, but not trying to go too incredibly crazy. I'm going to open up that B a little bit in just a moment because I don't like how there's not enough space in the top. So I open it up a little bit so I can have that darker layer inside the top opening of the B. Just makes it a little clearer. Then another light layer all the way around. It's very satisfying to watch, I think. It just snakes its way around all these shapes, especially along the bottom row where it's all one long connected line. And then finally filling in with dark color. Then I'm going to go back through and futz with the color a little bit. I want to try to kind of create some temperature variance, so I'll push the light colors more towards the red and the darker colors more towards the blue, and try to blend it into a slightly dark blue background instead of a stark black background. And then I've got to go back through and clean up the S and tie it into the design on the P because it didn't quite blend correctly. You can see I've gone to this dark blue and just creating some blending mid-tones between them. And that's pretty much where the logo ends up. Like I said, I'm really happy with that logo, but then I start going to create this kind of almost like a topographical map effect. And I'm going to keep this in here because it is a cool effect, but I do one thing and then I completely change it in a minute. So I had this idea of like lightning bolts showing it going down, and it created a really cool effect, but it wasn't the effect that I wanted. I still got that kind of topographical thing, but it didn't read with a lot of depth. So I tried a couple things, and I did a lot of blurring, and it gave it this really nice glowing neon effect, but it just wasn't what I was going for. You can see I'll bring that arch down a little bit, close it off, kind of separate the logo a little bit, help with the composition, and just playing around with a lot of things because it's just not clicking for me yet, and so I'm just messing with it until it clicks for me. And I ended up having to leave it for like a full day until it would finally fully click for me. And you see me just trying every tool that I've got in my arsenal to find something that makes it click. And I land on a gradient, do this little gradient, and it's not bad. I add a little bit more texture to the person, and that helps a lot when I add this extra texture to the figure. That helps a bunch. Bring it out a little bit, make it not quite so flat and lifeless. But the background is still just not doing it for me, so I leave it for a day. I finished my stream, and I was like, I'm going to leave this for a day. I'm going to come back to it later. So if you're watching the stream, everything after this is not from the stream, after I put in these last few little details. Come back to it the next day, and I kind of decide this isn't working for me. I want to do something different. So I keep that topographical divide idea, but I really want to have this feeling of depth and this feeling of layerage with it. Layerage, that's a fun word. So I do slowly brightening colors and slowly reddening colors to give it that impression that they're coming forward. I do a lot of shadow work in just a moment. You can already kind of see the idea coming through a little easier. So I'm adding in some light, rough shadows with a little bit of blurred blue, just to, again, give a greater sense of depth. And then I want to blend out those white lines on the inside. So I'll go through and just slowly blend them together. And you'll notice on the first one, I do it the hard way. And then after the first one, I realize that there's a better way to do this. I get the first one done, I get my concept proved, I'm like, yes, this is what I want to do, but there's got to be a faster way to do this. And so I realized that I can just select the colors. I'm still doing it the hard way. There we go. I realized that I can just select the colors, scoop my selection box over, and then fill it in. And I get the same effect without having to be so careful in my placement. So it takes me a minute to get it to work fully correctly, but once I get the hang of it, it's so much faster and so much easier, and I'm not having to zoom in everywhere and clean everything up. There's still a couple places that need to get cleaned anytime there's a weird connection, anything like that, but you can see me going ahead and cleaning up those connections before I do the blending. And I just do that for all of these white lines to kind of give them a little bit more, again, just depth. And I go back through and kind of try to refine some of the shadows a little bit, just give them a little bit more. And there you have it. This is my pseudo cover for The Void by Spiritbox. If you've never listened to Spiritbox, they're a great metal band. I absolutely adore them. Please go check them out. I got to see them live a little over a year ago, and it was one of the best concerts I'd ever been to. It was Spiritbox and Ghost, so it was just, again, a double whammy. Great night, great concert. Go check out Spiritbox, and I'll catch you in the next one.